Jordan, welcome to the Messy Truth Podcast.
Thank you.
So you're a somatic therapist. What the body and what is happening in the body, as opposed to just like the mind.
When you have a feeling, you can't understand feelings. No, like you can't make sense of them in a way that like you can try to articulate. You know, all the poetry tries to understand love, but it doesn't quite do it. Just like our feelings. And what happens is like if you're experiencing sadness and you're trying to understand why you're sad, on some like physiological level, you're freezing the feeling to understand it. You like lock it in and you like observe it and you try to understand it. And a lot of therapy is about like freezing a feeling so that you understand it conceptually. But that doesn't actually teach you to move feelings through, which is what feelings long to do. Sadness wants to be expressed as a tear, for example, or anxiety wants to be expressed as vulnerability. So somatic therapy teaches your body how to tolerate a feeling, make space for it, and allow it to move through without being caught in the like locked in programming of trying to understand what's going on. So a different way to put it is that somatic therapy is a bottom-up approach. What's going on in your system, in your body, wants to come up and be expressed. Then you can perhaps understand it more, as opposed to a top-down approach, which is a lot of therapy. Like understand a feeling that's happening in here. Somatic therapy is about feeling it and moving it through your body.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating to me being as old as I am to just like, discover that I'm not. But I'm saying like, you know, we're like, what would you be doing if you weren't an entrepreneur? And I always say I'd be a singer. We started working together and you told me I need to start taking singing lessons. And I was like, how does he know? You know, it was my response. And you had told me that I hold a lot of grief in my throat, and so singing would be great, which I was like, well, shit, that makes so much sense. People are talking about somatic therapists quite as much as they're talking about therapists.
I mean, I didn't go to school here. I moved to San Francisco when I was 21, and there 20 years ago, it was a more, advanced, like the hippie culture, like, free expression, and the schools represented that in some way. It was Don Johnson who started the somatic psychology program. Don Johnson, no, different one. He's like Yale theologian, and he got really interested in the body and tried to figure out a way to bring that into an embodied experience. So he started this somatic psychology program at California Institute of Integral Studies, where I went to graduate school. It's not necessarily the approach that is taught through and through, because it's harder to prove somatic therapy as opposed to like cognitive behavioral therapy or, other modalities. This is more of like a soft science. How can you measure the body's emotional intelligence and health?
What made you drawn to it?
I was always an athlete growing up. It was in my nature to be interested in the body, meditation and movement and exercise and athleticism. That was just the way that I knew to be healthy emotionally. It wasn't that I was seeking somatic psychology. I actually wasn't studying I didn't want to be a therapist. That wasn't my approach, but I did want to work in the school systems like my parents did. It just so happened that I went to an open house at this graduate school, and they presented every modality that they had, somatic being one of them. And I'm like, that's it. That's me. So it was lucky that I found somatic therapy. Yeah.
But I also feel like you're so smart. You bridge the gap, because there's like a real therapy aspect to what you do. I mean, sometimes when I come and see you, we just talk for an hour and a half. So that's not like somatic necessarily, right? Like, So if someone was coming to see you, what can they expect?
When you were talking about grief, you would hold your breath. And when you'd hold your breath, the muscles in your neck would get tight. And and I would just notice that, right? Sometimes it'd just be a noticing and not me expressing what I'm noticing. In somatic therapy and the talk therapy, they're related, but sometimes it's called for to talk out the content. Sometimes it's important to put the content aside and work with the body, right? And the work we're doing on ourselves is to be able to be to be able to embody, ourselves and embody our interests, right? So if you're talking about what you're grieving, but your body isn't grieving, then I would be focusing more on supporting you to embody and move through grief. And this is why, I think singing would really help you, because it's stuck in your throat, you're holding your breath, it's really tight. Let's help you move it through. That isn't to negate the importance of what are you grieving and what does it mean, because I think the most important stage of grief is meaning making. So it's important to spend an hour and a half talking or more about what's the meaning of this grief for you right now, triggers that are associated to the grief, and what does it mean for you now and in the future. And if we're just talking about it, but you're holding your breath the whole time, then what's probably going to happen is that you're going to repeat a dynamic again, because your body is still trying to figure out a way to move through this. So I think it's the art of vacillating between the content and the embodiment of the word.
Makes so much sense, of the importance of clearing the body.
Mm-hmm. The unintended consequence of a lot of modalities of therapy, it's that the approach is inherently about pain tolerance. And you'll see this in the apps a lot, calm down, self-regulate, soothe. And that's a really important skill to learn, but that's not, in my mind, therapeutic in nature. It's first step of 5, let's say. When you're experiencing anxiety, and it's something that your body is wanting to express itself into completion, then soothing it will inhibit the completion of the feeling. And feelings,
you're almost suppressing it.
You're suppressing it.
Yeah.
So a lot of therapy is inherently about pain tolerance.
Yeah.
And I don't see it that way. I think therapy should be and is about pleasure tolerance. How much pleasure can you tolerate in your system? And yeah.
By the way, this is how
therapy goes.
I'm like, what?
You're like simpler.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you desire to sing and express yourself fully. That would be a pleasurable experience. That's your authentic self being expressed. From the somatic lens, it's about teaching somebody to be in their full expression.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling something, rather than tolerate it or suppress it, actually learn to express it to its fullness, then I see anxiety as that's the beginning of a full experience. So what is the full experience? What's that feeling? What's the message of the feeling? For a lot of people, anxiety is that first step toward being more vulnerable, being more emotional, being more like a lover. So I think if we look at our feelings as a messenger for a full experience and we get curious on what that is, then I think we're learning to tolerate the pleasure of our authentic self being present, as opposed to learning another skill to suppress. It's just I feel like meditation and manifesting are big buzzwords right now, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it's interesting. And again, the anxiety or something that's happening in your body is sending you a message. Be really real here. I was really sad this morning about some stuff. I journaled about it and cried about it, and I feel okay now. And it's so where's the line of I want to express this, I want to feel it. I also don't want to let it completely overtake my life. I think that you feel okay now because you were able to feel the sadness.
Because I don't think that I suppressed it.
No.
However, I feel when I was going through my divorce, my second divorce, when I was at the breakup, which was excruciating for me, which I met you on the tail end of that, I could not get a hold of it. The sadness that I feel now is much more okay, I feel sad about this. I had a good cry about it, and I'm okay right now. I remember feeling I can't live like this anymore. How much do you say okay, I've got to move on with my life?
Number one is being able to be functional in your life. And most people don't have the luxury of therapy, so they do need to healthfully suppress any feeling that would debilitate them so they can be functional in the world. in the throes of really potent, crisis or grief, there's just going to be times where you just can't be functional. If that lasts for like 3 weeks or 5 months or 2 years, and we're talking about not being functional, I'm not going to ask you to continue to feel the crisis of this potent grief. It's like we do need to find a way to vacillate between feeling the fullness of your experience and being functional in the world, because being functional in the world is such a huge part of your mental health. So that there's an art in that. I think the important skill set, if you do have the luxury of doing the work, is being able to assess the consequence of suppression. As children, especially in middle school, we learn to suppress our emotions so that we get validation or acceptance. Boys don't cry, right? And girls don't get angry. I mean, if you do, you might not be accepted socially. So you suppress these emotions for the benefit of, belonging. And that's really an essential mechanism or coping mechanism to survive and thrive in the world. If you don't know you're suppressing natural parts of yourself, then it'll have pretty disastrous consequences at some point. I think that my view is that this is what the midlife crisis is all about. Is if you don't do the work, then suppressing your sadness, let's say, for 30 or 40 years will eventually manifest as something else that are even more extreme, right? And so, suppressing emotion is, again, like a necessary skill set to be functional in the world. But you have to be functional and you have to know the consequences of suppression. So it's like being able to have like the assessment at the ready of like how healthy you are and how much you're holding and how much you're letting go and how to stay functional.
I guess there's also a time and place, right?
Time and place.
It's like if you, to your point, like if you can't, I was in an interesting place when my marriage fell apart because I had this literal space to grieve it. So I allowed myself to grieve it, which I think is why I probably moved through it relatively fast.
Also why you're such a potent leader and healer in the world. What is it? Cabral, the poet, Gibran, wrote on joy and sorrow. Your joy is your sorrow unmasked. That the deeper you can go into the well of your sadness, the more light that you can express. I can express this much light because I've been in this much dark.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like I recently had an injury that I've recovered from, and my gratitude to my health of my body is that much more alive because I recently experienced not having a healthy body, similar with like loss. The celebration of those alive that you are close to is that much more enhanced. So your joy is your sorrow unmasked, and your ability to experience grief at the level that you did, I think, defines the potency you are as a healer and as a leader. So
you always say that I'm a healer.
You're authentic. And being authentic is contagious. And being authentic is being in your most healthy state. So just being your authentic self is being a healer to others because it is contagious.
Brene Brown, she's like, you get to the middle of your life and you get the tap on your shoulder from the universe. It's like, you can't run anymore. I thought it was just me, because I had sold a business and I was at this crossroads of what am I going to do with my time now? What's my purpose now? But it turns out most people in their mid 40s are in this similar crisis of who am I now? And what does my life look like now? I'm feeling like I can't phone it in and fake it anymore.
Yeah. Your body can't tolerate it anymore.
Yeah. I was even just saying to Grant this morning, we were walking, and I feel like my life was always pretty good and easy. And it wasn't until my mom died, which was about 8 years ago. That was probably the hardest thing I'd had to deal with. And then my marriage fell apart, and then my son fell apart. It was like a house of cards. It all came crashing down. And it's was it just the time that just happened to be the time, or was it this midlife crisis? Is that when you see most people?
A common theme is I cannot maintain the false character that I've developed in my life to survive and thrive. Yeah. Eventually that has an impact. Sometimes it's sooner because there's people who have experienced more pain earlier, sometimes it's later, but eventually, if you're not authentic, it'll catch up to you.
Yeah. I think you're really brilliant and great at what you do. But I also think that there's a part of you that's really lived it in your own sense, and however much you want to divulge you can. I know some of the things that you've been through, which is comforting to me.
Well, ultimately, I believe it's the relationship that's healing. I want to be as authentic as I possibly can, while also trying to assess if it's in service of your own growth. Relationships to me are the container of all of our spiritual and emotional development and our growth. So if I'm not in relationship to you, but just a blank slate listening to you, sure, there's benefit to it in some sense. Hearing yourself mentalize and process. It's just not the way I am naturally. So I have to be how I am naturally in my work, and how I am naturally is authentic and relational. Yeah. I want to connect with you. And I can't connect with you if I'm just listening to you and you don't know anything about me. Yeah. So that's where I come from in terms of why I divulge myself. I do think that in the therapy and outside of therapy, it's relationships that are healing. We don't do this work alone. Therapy is only 100 years old, right? So talking about somatic therapy or neuropsychology, that's like 20 years old. Like, we don't know anything about this. So this is like, a soft science at best. But my desire to help, I felt like I was my parents' couples therapist when I was 6. I would pour my love into not only them, but into trying to understand them. And that's what I do with everybody. I love you so much, I want to understand you so I can help you. Yeah. And so I would help translate what my parents are trying to say to each other.
At 6?
Yeah, that's what I remember, just like watching it. The same way sometimes I saw my daughter watch me and my ex-wife, of like wanting us to be connected and changing her behavior so that there would be more ease and safety in the house. And I remember doing that version when I was young. It led to a lot of pain. And I didn't know that consciously, but I felt it. I was angry. I was in unhealthy relationships. I didn't love myself. I wasn't taking care of myself. And that just culminated throughout the years into, eventually being in a marriage in which I was repeating that behavior, like effusive, genuinely do love and care about my ex-wife, and also being okay or not okay, but being not okay, but sacrificing that and not having that love reciprocated.
Yeah. Because that's just what...
It's what I knew. It's what I knew. In my 40s now, eventually had an impact, especially not having known how to take care of myself. It all culminated in August of 2020, I had a near-death experience. A blood clot passed through my lungs. And it's true when you hear people say about having near-death experiences, you kind of wake up into what's important in life and the impermanence of it. The last thought I had before I thought I died, I passed out, but I thought I was about to die. I said my goodbyes to everybody. My daughter was my last person I said goodbye to, and then it was just me and me. And my last thought before I passed out was that I was proud of myself for fighting for what I believed in. I'm really happy that was my last thought, as opposed to like, oh no, oh shit, I'm not ready. But I was actually proud of myself. And then I passed out. I survived, and it changed. And from that point on, couldn't not be in my truth. This next thought occurred to me after I woke up and recovered, which is that though I fought for what I believed in, I didn't win. That is still like a haunting thought that motivates me today. And what winning means to me is to love myself the way that I love others, and to find a relationship in which I receive as much love as I give.
Yeah.
And that not to the fault of my ex-wife, because she's a loving person and a wonderful mother, but didn't give me the love that I needed.
Right, for you.
for me. And so
is somebody else out there that she will.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So I couldn't not be in my truth, and left the marriage and my children. And though like my kids are the center of my life, so am I now.
I feel like the younger generations are getting a better version of parents than, I shouldn't say better, but just, a more evolved version of parents than we did, where like, I think so many of us in my peer group is like, God, we really have a lot of unpacking to do in our fucking childhood. Everybody in my age range, I think we all kind of have the same stuff of like not getting the actual love that we needed as we know it to be now. What do you used to do with that?
Yes. So you'll have to read my book when it comes out at the end of the summer, if you really want to know. But
are you really writing a book?
Yeah. It's essentially for somebody struggling in relationship and what to do and how to think about it. And I'll give away the meat of it. Thank you. It's that it's not about your partner. You're the problem. And sorry to tell you, all of you, you're the problem. It's not your partner. What I mean by that is kind of like fueled by two of my favorite quotes. One of them is by Carl Jung. He says, "The greatest impediment to a child's happiness is the unlived life of the parent."
I feel like so many people would quote that guy.
It's, goodness gracious, way ahead of his time in terms of emotional intelligence, akin to Einstein in physics, right? We're only beginning to grasp what he somehow understood.
I knew instinctively that what you just quoted, that like I was not happy. I loved my kids more than anything. And I was so grateful. And I talk about it all the time. I was like, I felt like I hit the lottery that I was able to stay home with my kids. Like, what a gift, But I got to this point where I was like, this is not enough for me. I remember having this conversation with my boys and saying, like, if I'm happy and doing what I love, I'm going to show up and be a better mom to you.
That's right.
And which I feel like is that,
that's right.
Which I just think is important. Like, then we deal with this, like, oh, I had these kids and I love my kids. I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
But if you're not, and I think it's also part of why, like, I felt like I got divorced. Like, somebody fucking posted on my Insta. I had posted a very vulnerable thing, and somebody's like, maybe you shouldn't have divorced your first husband. I was supposed to stay in this unhappy marriage and model that shit.
If you couldn't change your life, which most of our parents couldn't, then
why couldn't they?
Therapy wasn't a thing, for one. I mean, my parents were both elementary school teachers who were good people and loving and present, but like,
wasn't even on their
no, like not at all. If anything, if you went to therapy, it would be like a psychiatrist that would give you medication, right? So our parents couldn't financially or emotionally or culturally. There was just no world in which talking about feelings was in any way productive. Not because they're limited, but because of how they grew up.
Yes.
And we have to be able to see that objectively. And that they couldn't did have an impact on their ability to see and love themselves, and know themselves, and which then has an impact on how they parent. You can't see in others what you can't see in yourself. I mean, I think about intimacy as an exchange, as a pendulum. The deeper you go, the deeper I go. The more you love, the more I can feel it. The more I feel my own love, the more I can love you. It's a pendulum back and forth. And that exchange is, that the first exchange where people experience this is with their parents or their family of origin. And if we have parents who don't have the ability to, for very understandable reasons, then their ability to attune to their children, or see them or empathize with them is limited. Yeah. That's not because there's something wrong with them. It's just because of what is. And so these children, we grow up having, experienced the consequences of that in our attachment systems and our understanding of our emotions. We get into relationships that repeat the pattern. Yeah. And we get caught in this mindset that if you were to be different, I would feel better. If you just don't do that, like, I'll feel loved. And that's being a child with the parent, right? That's being a child with the parent. But we repeat these patterns in our adult relationships and really take on a selfish and immature perspective of what emotional health is. It's not the other. It's not your parent. If you're an adult, it's not your parent. It's not your partner. It's you. You're the problem.
Quite literally the Taylor Swift song.
Is it?
The song that she has that says, "It's me. I'm the problem. It's me."
I'm the problem. It's me. And that's you are. And I am.
Yeah.
You're my self-love and my sovereignty and my emotional health and my presence is all on me. We can grow together if we're both accountable to our own experience with each other. But my growth is not contingent or conditional on your ability to see me or change. If you can't grow with me, this is not a healthy relationship. Yeah. And the second quote that I really like is Ram Dass's. He says, if you think you're enlightened, go home and see your mother.
It's also like not being a victim, not allowing yourself to be like, this is not my fault. And maybe it's not your fault. And I know that
it wasn't your fault. It's your fault now.
Yeah, exactly. You just can't live in that victim mentality. Before I let you go, I know that I want to make sure that for people who are, interested in learning more about you and what you do, I know you're starting.
Thank you for asking. Yeah. As much as I've been a therapist for 17 years, I've also been a teacher. And I find that there's room to pause the therapy moment and add a teaching moment, as we talk about what we're talking about in terms of parent dynamics and emotional health and understanding what attachment means and what triggers actually mean and what to do about that. That's a teaching, right? That's curriculum for emotional intelligence that we didn't have, that somewhat exists today. But the curriculum of emotional intelligence is such an important adjunct to the therapeutic container where we process our feelings. Yeah. Right. I like to work in short-term goal-oriented therapy because I feel like if you can't leave after a few months and take the work with you, then I'm not doing you a service. I'm creating a dependency on me. And I think a way that really, really accelerates therapy is to embody the curriculum of what emotional intelligence is, so that you can apply that to yourself. So I'm slowly pruning my therapy practice and opening up more of a teaching practice, because I've created this curriculum for emotional intelligence, and it's called the Relationship Mastery Class, and it's 8 weeks long, and I take a group of people through developmental curriculum of emotional intelligence, and it's in person or online? It's online. It's Zoom class. Yeah. And you can go to my Instagram. Yeah, I'm teaching the second class now. Okay, we'll put a link in the notes and whatever, and talk about that so people can, I'm sure. Thank you. Much cheaper than your normal. It's affordable. What do you think the key to a happy life is? That's the question, right? Wow. I know I probably should tell people this before, but it's probably better that you don't know. It reminds me of in therapy, there's something called the doorknob confession. The doorknob confession. It's that the way out, they say oh, by the way, I'm an addict. And then they say goodbye. You're wait a minute. Wait, that's the hardest thing. That was you should start with that and bury the lead. I'm going to have a great answer when I'm in my car driving home, by the way. So, but I'd say, know your truth. Embody it and be unabashedly passionate about it. And I agree with that, because it's living in your truth and your authenticity is really where the goal is. These moments of heightened experiences, the typical happy, when I'm playing with my kids, it just becomes so joyful, and but those are the sorrow unmasked. Before, it's I can experience this amount of joy because I'm so passionate in my life. Everything I do, to me, is so meaningful, and I get to experience the rewards of that in the joy, but the day-to-day grueling, conviction to be passionate is part of that. Yeah, true. Thank you. Thank you. This is great. Yeah.